good morning and good evening and good afternoon, and welcome to another session of Expand Your Horizon. And we are very fortunate today to have Patricia Bubner with us. Hi, Patricia.
So grateful that you invited me today, Shai, and thanks everyone for joining in.
Yes, I think we're going to have an exciting session. I think it's a space that I'm personally am very excited about, the alternative protein industry, and how can we make the world a better place but still consume some of the things that we like to consume. So personally, I'm very excited, and I'm probably going to have a lot of questions throughout the presentation, so apologies in advance. Okay. We will start the session shortly. I do want to remind all of our participants that the chat box is open as of now, and if there are any questions to Patricia, please punch them into the chat box, and we will collect the question at the end. We'll leave sufficient time for Q&A at the end of this session. I'll introduce you very briefly, but I want to spend a little bit more time getting to know you, Patricia, and your fabulous story. But very briefly, you started as a scientist and engineer. You worked on the future of food from an ethical and sustainability point of view. Today, you are the founder and the CEO of a company called Orbillion Bio that we will hear much more about later today. That is active in the premium cell-cultured meat. And before that, you were also active in the early stage ecosystem with different projects and different startups. And today, you're not only leading Orbillion, but you also have some personal interest that we will hear about them very soon. So I think we're ready. This is a very short description, but I want to hear the full story. So Patricia, tell us more about you.
Thank you for the good introduction, Shai. You already know a lot. So yeah, I want also to tell everyone today, I'm calling in from Switzerland, where I'm participating in Davos, where currently the World Economic Forum is taking place. But I am originally from Austria and live in California. So there is quite a bit to the story of how I got where I am now. And it started with me growing up in Austria and not only being very interested in food, but also, to be honest, I always was a little bit of a nerd. And I always have this fascination with what do things consist of? What are things made of at the molecular level? Not quite down to the really physics of it, but the chemical composition of things. And it got me thinking of what is food made of? What are the molecules in food? And that really led me to study chemical engineering. I know it probably doesn't make a lot of sense for people when they hear that, but for me at that point, it made perfect sense. I really wanted to build nutritious and flavorful, actually perfect food, because I'm kind of a perfectionist too, from molecular scratch and having a deep understanding of food. Well, back then that was not a thing, and now it is. So it's been such an interesting journey for me, trying to understand what food is made of, going into chemistry, learning what everything is made of, learning how we can build molecules, and always trying to give chemistry a better name, because people often have negative associations with it. And I didn't understand it. I'm like, but it is just science, and you can do good things with it or not so good things. So it really depends on what we make out of it. So I was always interested in sustainability, and that brought me to my PhD project, where I worked on biofuels, second generation biofuels on a high level. I really studied with and built up a team in Austria that studied how tiny biological molecules can degrade cellulose and make ethanol out of it. And that was a very successful project that eventually brought me to UC Berkeley in California, in the Bay Area, where I continued my research as a postdoc at the Energy Biosciences Institute. And I worked there at this fabulous think tank, really, for biofuels. And it was what made it so special was that they had people from all parts of the world and from all walks of life and science, and also other interesting backgrounds. We had people from companies that worked there on policy for biofuels. We had people that did the business model, that did the economic modeling, and so on and so forth. And I learned a lot about what can happen if this diversity of people, this diverse background really is put to work and is combined to achieve a greater good. Now, we all know that biofuels and the whole clean tech thing took a downturn, unfortunately, in about 2014 when the oil prices tanked. But it also got me to think on that as a scientist, I really need to understand better what is the impact of the science that I'm doing, and is there an impact, and how can it have a direct impact on society and on people? How can we also make money of it, right? So all that helped really shape my thinking. And also at the same time, Berkeley is a fantastic place to explore different things, and it brought me back to food, and happy to talk about that a little bit more. So I don't know, Shai, if there's any questions that immediately pop up for you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Fascinating. And so where would you consider home? Is it California or Austria, or where is home for you?
That is a great question. You know, I thought about this quite a bit. And last time somebody asked me, I told them home for me is where I can live the life that I want to live. And that depends, you know, it's for me right now, I would say it's the United States, but definitely have a very strong ties to Europe. I love to come back and visit. And it's all about the people that you are with, right? So right now, I'm very, very fortunate to have two amazing co-founders, to have amazing team members, investors that I work with. So all these people create home for me. It's not a location, I would say. It's the people that I'm fortunate to be and work with.
Thank you. Well, two things that, you mentioned that probably if we searched Google, we wouldn't know about you. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about these two pieces of information. The first is that you were making your own bread way before it became kind of like a Corona type of activity, right? And the second thing is that you have a 500 kilos pet, right? I'm curious about both these pieces, especially the second one.
Let me start with the second one then. Do you have a guess what it is?
I was imagining it's like a cow or a bull or something like that.
Actually, I really like cows, so I would love to own a cow, but it is a horse.
Wow.
So yeah, I was just, since I was a little kid, I was fascinated by horses. In fact, I remember the first time I was about 7 years or no, younger, I was 5 years old when I saw a horse, like where I remember seeing a horse, and the rider stopped for me and asked if I want to touch it. And that was life altering for me. It was just so fascinating. So I always wanted to have my own horse. And in my world, everybody knows about horses and has horses. And only when I leave the barn, I realize, no, it's actually a pretty rare thing. In Austria, it's more common. So 4 years ago, I got a baby horse at that time. Now she's 5 years old and is just, teaching me a lot about animals, about just really humbling to be able to care for such an animal and share moments with them. So I enjoy it very much when I have the time to do it.
And she's in Austria or with you in the US?
She is in the US. She's in California, but she's a Spanish horse, so with European roots.
Yes, like all the good horses.
So yeah, and the second thing about making bread, that's very much tied to my love and interest in food, because I always love to cook and bake and make things from scratch. And I started baking bread, which is not that unusual, during my master's thesis. And then I realized, okay, I got yeast and sourdough mixes and bread, and flour from the shop. And then I was like, how is sourdough being made? How can I make it myself? And I really dove into it. And it was during my PhD that I started making sourdough from scratch by taking rye from the farmer's market and really adding water and taking different types of rye, mixing it with other grains and making various types of sourdough. And I learned that the best sourdough, in my experience, is the one that starts smelling like freshly cut apple. After a while, then you have the perfect balance of yeast and also the other bacteria that make the sourdough sour. So that's that. And not only that, I also made my own malt. So I roasted it and I made it from...
Wow.
And it's just for me really getting back to how do we make food and how can we make things from scratch. And it brought me to the project that I alluded to earlier that I started at UC Berkeley with some seed funding from the Berkeley Food Institute, where we grew millet together with farmers. Millet's an ancient grain. And that was really because after I made malt and sourdough, I was like, I really would like to grow my own grain and make malt and sourdough from that. So that's kind of my interest in really making things from scratch and knowing how to do things, and especially related to food.
Amazing. Well, I already have a few questions, but I suggest let's jump into the story of Orbillion, okay? And the audience can now see, and I hope you can also see the first page of your presentation. So let's start with that. Tell us a little bit the story behind Orbillion and how you came up founding this company, and then let me know when you want me to flick the pages, and if I have a few questions in the middle, allow me to interrupt you.
That sounds great. Well, thank you for bringing up the slide deck. So at Orbillion Bio, which is the name of the company that I founded about 2.5 years ago but over in California with my two co-founders, we're making premium cell cultured meat. So what does that mean? Premium, what is cell cultured meat? I'll dive into that a little bit, but what I would like you to take away from this first picture there, it's really about enjoying food. It's about enjoying food together. And we're thinking a lot about what, as I mentioned also from my story, what makes good food, and how can we create experiences for people now and in the future. So if you could go to the next slide, we'll dive a little bit into why we're doing what we're doing. So there's a lot of conversation around plant-based meats, about vegan food, about how important it is really for us to change the way we're eating, that it's not sustainable. We're hearing about climate change, we're hearing about land use, and so on and so forth. The reality is we love meat. Many of us love meat, and we will continue to love it. And food is something that's so intrinsically part of our human experience. It's part of culture. It's part of sharing love. It's about families. It's about friends sharing meals together. And I don't have to tell all of you how important foods are on so many levels and how foods are being prepared. So we know that, we're aware of that. We want to give people options. I do eat meat. I'm trying to be very conscious about it, but it is for a lot of people very hard to impossible to go vegan. But at the same time, a lot of us want to eat either more environmentally conscious, or they want to eat more sustainable, or they have to change what they eat because of health concerns. So how can we give these people options? How can we give us options? Meaning something that we enjoy eating, but something that doesn't harm the planet as much. And the biggest culprit right now is beef. Beef has a huge environmental impact because of the methane emissions, because of land use discussions, and just also because it's not really efficient in converting feedstock to meat, which is what we actually want to eat. And people always laugh when I tell that, but a cow eats a lot of grass and grain, depending on how it's being raised. And in the end, it produces, yes, some meat out of it, but also bones and a lot of other things that we don't need, like feelings. So we could just cut all of that out and have a very efficient conversion of the inputs, of the feedstock inputs that we use, by removing the animal from the equation. And by that, we can also serve a huge market. If we look at the global meat market, it's $1 trillion market, and it continues to grow.
Yeah, maybe two points. First, just to share, I turned vegan, I think 4 years ago. I really lost count, and it wasn't like one day. It was kind of like a gradual change. I switched off dairy and then later, meat. I'm not very religious about it. I do, bite once in a while, but 90% of the time I am trying to be vegan for some of the reasons that you mentioned, the health factors, the environmental footprint, and also the moral challenges of how this industry is treating the animals. So this is my personal story. The other thing that I wanted to mention, which relates also to some of our businesses, we're very active in the water business through two different business groups, either at the municipal level, but also in agriculture. And you mentioned, feeding the cows or the different animals to produce meat. It's unimaginable how much water is consumed in order to produce 1 kilogram of steak. I don't remember exactly the number, but it's like thousands of liters of water, and usually these are pretty high quality water that otherwise would be either used for irrigation or for drinking. So in addition to the feed challenge, the water is also becoming a real issue for growing livestock.
Yes, these are all very important points. Absolutely. And you mentioned the point about the moral thing, also eating animals. And that's one thing that I think a lot of people are not aware of, that the way that we are now producing meat is very different from what we used to do 50, 100 years ago. Industrial agriculture has helped sustain a lot more people, but at the same time, it has disconnected us from the way we produce and eat food. And for me, growing up with grandparents and great-grandparents that were farmers, and I learned to milk a cow when I was 6 years old. We actually my grandparents had rabbits that my grandfather would harvest, and we would have them in family dinners. So I had a little bit of a more contact to how food is being made, but a lot of people nowadays don't. They go into a supermarket, they buy packaged meat, or they go to a restaurant and get the product, but they do not have the connection to both the animal that it comes from, but also the people that make their food. And let me tell you one thing, farmers do not have it easy. It's a hard, relentless job that they are doing, feeding everyone on this planet and not getting a lot of thanks for it or money. But that's a whole total different topic, but very important and very connected to what we're doing. So if we move on to the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit more about how we are making meat and how that's different from how meat has been made, and how it's also a little bit the same. So what we do is we produce real meat, meaning we take cells from an animal, we give them everything they need. It's not artificial blood, but like blood brings an animal tissue and our tissues everything it needs, we have a nutrient solution called media that the cells swim in, and that has everything they need so they can grow and divide, even though they are not in an animal's body. And after a certain time, we can harvest these cells and make a real meat product out of that. And then it's up to the consumer to enjoy it. And I know that this is kind of a foreign concept, but I would like to remind everyone that what we as humans have always done in the past is we've used what nature has given us and improved on it. the animals that we domesticated, the animals that we have been breeding for centuries, that's something that really accelerated the way we were able to feed our loved ones. And now we're doing the same thing. We're going one step further. We're building on the craft of the past and now taking it to a step where we're like, we know how to make good food. We have the advances that science gave us, and now we can make it even without an animal, but it's the very same thing.
So essentially the final product is biologically, genetically, physically identical to a meat that comes from the animal?
Exactly. So we really take the cells, right? And the beauty of it is that we, especially at Orbillion, we really want to understand the biology of these cells, meaning why is, for example, Wagyu beef that we're working with so much healthier, so much more nutritious, and so much more tasty than other types of beef? What is the biological basis of that? Nobody has ever looked into that because nobody thought about growing bovine cells in the lab. What for, right? But now we really understand how to build food and meat that is flavorful and healthful. So the goal there is to really make Wagyu beef, Kobe beef, nutritious food available for everyone. And if you think back on how and on the meat that we eat right now, why are we eating Angus or other breeds? It's because we can produce them in industrial agriculture. It's not because they're the tastiest ones. And so for cellular agriculture, which is what we're doing, since we can grow any type of cell and it will cost us the same whether we do Angus or we do Wagyu beef, we're like, why wouldn't we start with the very best beef that we can get?
Yeah, so can you share a little bit more? I'm not sure that everybody's familiar with the differences between Angus and Kobe and Wagyu, so maybe a couple of sentences on the differences?
Yeah, happy to elaborate a little bit more. So Angus, for example, is a very typical breed in the US. They're black cows. They are usually harvested at 2 years of age, and they grow a lot of muscle. And that's why, and they grow that muscle really fast. So it's very I would say economical for farmers to use that type of meat. If you look at the Wagyu cow, so Wagyu beef is the Japanese origin beef, where we get this fine marbling, and special type of Wagyu beef is called Kobe. It's just from a special geography and a special line of breeding. So that beef is very different. The Wagyu cows are much smaller than Angus. They take longer to grow, and the fine marbling really only happens between 2 and 3 years of age. So you can harvest them later. And I'm sure a lot of you know that cows eat quite a lot. So having to feed them 1 year longer is a lot for the farmer. That's why that meat is also much more expensive than, for example, an Angus. And Angus cows, you can put them into industrialized farm operations because they are docile, they're easy to keep there, they're not stressed out, by having that many animals that in that close proximity. So that all makes them very amenable. It doesn't mean, though, that that's the best beef you could possibly eat. And another thing that I would like you to think about is that especially the meat that comes from industrial farming operations suffers from a lot of drawbacks, like there's a lot of antibiotics being used because there are a lot of animals in close proximity, but also because antibiotics help the animals to grow faster. And then the meat that you get out of that is definitely not the best meat that you can get, right? So with that being said, the real way to scale meat is the way we're doing it, where we don't have to use antibiotics, where you can make good meat at scale once we are at scale.
Amazing. And maybe final question on the process. So, you mentioned that a piece of steak is actually composed of different type of cells. There's the fat and there's the actual meat and probably other types that I'm not even aware of. And can you actually grow all these different type of cells in the reactor and then end up with a like a proper steak that I wouldn't be able to make the difference between this one and a real one?
This will be a little bit a longer answer, Shai, but why make a steak? That was my first question. So yes, we can make a steak. Will it look like the real thing? They're kind of, but not really. And steaks also, like if you look at the business aspects of it, the margins are for farmers right now are not that big. And the other thing is cows, cattle make perfect steaks. So for me, the way I see the future of food and the future of meat is that there will be regenerative farmers that hopefully can free up more land to use for regenerative farming, where you have a less intense farming with fewer cattle, with smaller herds, no industrialization of farming or less, right? And they can then sell their steaks to a really fair price and say, look, that's the real steak. You don't get that anywhere else. That's what I really hope for them. And really be seen as that final product that you cannot get anywhere else, because it's, every animal looks different. Every steak is a little bit different. Whereas where I see cell cultured meat really thriving is in the mass market once we are at commodity prices, not necessarily by replicating something that's out there that is very difficult to replicate. Yes, it will be possible in the future, but to make a beautiful steak at margins that are good enough for us to survive as a business, that is a couple of years away. But what we can do right now is really good products that are ground beef, pate products, or just with less structured beef products. And all these products are really actually the much bigger market share than steaks are. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So yeah, that's also telling you a little bit about how we see the market. So back to Orbillion, if you move to the next slide, and happy to answer any questions that come about how the process, as long as it's not going too deep into our IP. What does Orbillion do differently to other companies out there? And how do we look at meat and the products that we want to make? So one thing that definitely makes us stand out is, and I'll talk about us founders and the team that we are building and have built up in a little bit, is that we all have a technical background, but also have been in product development, have built teams, and also worked in business development. So we have a very broad background, and that really helped us to be 18 times faster than our competitors. We are the only cell cultured meat company that has served 3 different meats in our first tasting event. By that, I mean meats from 3 different species. And that only took us 4 months. We also used about 10 times less capital than other companies to do that. And so in these 4 months, we actually had 4 different species, the cell lines of 4 different species, but we made 3 products out of it and served them at our tasting that was last March in San Francisco. It was a pre-regulatory tasting event, and we served a Wagyu meatloaf, a wild elk sausage, and a lamb merguez product. And that also tells you a little bit about how we look at the meat that we want to produce. Beef, Wagyu beef in our case, the best beef you can get. We also are going after game like wild elk and bison that we also have in our lab, and lamb. And these really, if you look at beef and lamb, these two have the biggest climate footprint and land use footprint. And I do not have to tell you that lamb is very, very popular in a lot of regions outside of the US. And even as a ground beef has a very big part in a lot of cultures. And that's where we're going primarily after beef and lamb initially.
Yeah, I once read a very shocking statistic. If you combine all the sheep and the cows in the world and you consider them like a country, the carbon footprint of that country would be the 3rd after US and China.
Yes, I heard.
So it is like there are billions of cows and sheep. Most of them are, for industrial agriculture, as we discussed, and they have a significant footprint in terms of the environment.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So that's also where we're going after these products, because we want to make the biggest possible impact. And then if you look at things like game animals, elk and bison, they are right now there is a big market for it, but it hasn't been really tapped into because it's just not, we do not have enough elk or bison, right? If you remember, bisons have been largely killed off, and the herds there are very, very small. There's not much biodiversity. So even if people would want to buy more bison, they couldn't. And bisons, you can also not keep them in factory farming because they're very sensitive, and wild animals, they will just not stand the stress. So again, something where cellular agriculture can open up a market. I often compare it to salmon, which is something that before there were salmon farms, there was not really a market for salmon because we had to rely on wild caught salmon. But now it's a $30 billion market. And the same can be for elk, bison, and other game animals that are healthy, that are tasty, that are nutritious, and that currently are just not available at the amounts that we need them to.
Yeah. Well, never tried elk or bison, but definitely the Wagyu picture makes me hungry.
That's exactly what we want to elicit in people. At that pre-regulatory tasting event last year, we had a very select number of taste testers, and they were just really impressed. One person told us that our lamb tasted better than the animal-derived lamb that they ate afterwards. So that was definitely a big compliment. There is, by the way, a video out there of this tasting event that I invite you to watch to get a little bit of an impression of how people savored our first products.
Yeah, if you can send us the link, we will put it next to the link of this recording, so people can not only watch if they missed today's session, but they can also go into the link and watch the video. So we will upload it to our internal website.
Happy to do that.
And when you say cheaper, I don't know if this is not confidential, but can you give us a sense of what the current costs that you are able to reach, and what are maybe the plans for the next 2 years in comparison to current lamb and Wagyu costs?
Yeah. So the cheaper here refers to that we use less capital to get to that point than our competitors, right? So we were much more capital efficient in that sense. But in terms of current cost of cell cultured meat, there are a couple of numbers out there, and I also happy to share that there was a McKinsey report last year that showed that the cost for cell cultured meat is coming down very, very fast, actually faster than the cost for genome sequencing, which is one of the biggest barriers in thinking about cell therapy and other applications for human health, right? So we really, on our end, reduced the cost by 98% in the last year alone, which is, again, very, very fast. And we envision being at price parity in 2026 for our premium meats. And if you look, there's ground Wagyu that's being sold at $120, but we're more thinking about the price range of $40 to $61 per pound that we're looking at. And then, we heard from other companies, and that's also what the GFI, the Good Food Institute, has published, that by 2030 we will be at price parity with commodity meats. So that's not some far off future. That's really something that is pretty much around the corner, and I think it is very, very exciting both for us but also for the consumers.
Yes, amazing.
Because when we ask consumers, what we always hear is, hey, if that meat tastes the same, if it has regulatory approval, and if it is affordable, then yeah, of course I would eat it. Maybe I should ask that question to everyone here too. I get some more data points.
Sure. Well, actually, what we could do is maybe we can phrase it as a question, and people can reply in the chat, and Yael can maybe take a sample of what are the answers. So let's phrase it as a question. If you could buy a cell cultured meat that have the same taste, the same nutritional value, and at a same cost or slightly more expensive than what you currently pay for this in the supermarket, would you buy it tomorrow? And let's park this one, and we'll see in a second in a few minutes what answer we get.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And then if we go on to the next slide, talking a little bit about more how we are funded. We're of course a VC-backed company. We were in Y Combinator last year. I don't know how many people know it. It's I would say the best and the most well-known startup incubator in the US, maybe worldwide. I don't want to step out too far there, but definitely a fantastic program and has been very helpful, even though we had to do the program virtually because of that pandemic. And we secured our seed funding after that, are working with amazing investors that come from different fields. Some of them are really in the food space, some of them are in the environmental, climate, sustainability, impact investing space, and some of them are in the pharmaceutical industry. And then we have a lot of very passionate angel investors that came on even earlier than that, and a couple of investors that really help us also to align with future partners and customers. For example, the CEO of Instacart, Kichishimo, is one of our investors, and we're very, very happy to have the backing by all of these amazing funds. And so for us, of course, that also means that we are out there and need to get funding in order to grow. So capital is always a big question for any company in that space. But we saw that there's a lot of funding going on in food, and it's also very timely because we hear a lot about the conversation on how sustainability, how the food system is now really under attack by recent developments in the world. So we see that reflected in also the appetite on funding companies like us that are actively working on improving access to food for everyone. So let's move to the next slide.
Sorry.
Let's talk a little bit. No worries, Shai. And let's talk a little bit about the team behind Orbillion Bio. So the us three founders, Gabriel, Samet, and I, we have been working together previously. Gabe and I actually met at UC Berkeley when we were both postdocs. He was in a different lab, but we immediately connected because we were both very passionate about how can we turn our scientific findings and our knowledge into something that really is applicable to the society, and that can help really, instead of just being a paper or a publication out there that maybe not many people read. So for us, it was all about making sure that we can translate the knowledge we have into something that has an application. And Samet and I, we both work together at Boehringer Ingelheim, which is a big German private biopharma company. And Samet used to be the global head of technology and innovation at Boehringer Ingelheim. And I was a team lead in process development at Boehringer Ingelheim. And actually the project both of us worked on together was dealing with how to scale up mammalian cell culture. So this is, of course, very applicable for what we're doing right now. And Gabriel's background is in cell biology, and he also worked for the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, where he built a lot of connections and got grants and developed a business for that institute. And he knows half of the world in the field of cell biology, cultured meat, and food. So that is, of course, a fantastic background to have. And the three of us really got talking about our shared interest in food, and when I got really passionate about cell cultured meat, because as I told you before, it was always this driving, how can we make nutritious food from scratch? And cell cultured meat just ticked all the boxes when I first heard about it. And I asked Gabriel, and I'm like, hey, from a cell biology point, do you think that's possible? And he thought about it, and then he came back. He's like, yeah, absolutely. We just need to do this and this and this and that. And with Samet, it was similar. I'm like, from a scale-up standpoint, is this like, am I delusional thinking that that's possible? And he's like, wait, let me talk to my advisors and mentors and think about it and get back to you. And then he was like, absolutely, we should totally do this. I think this and this and this are the problems, and this we can do to solve it. That's really how Orbillion Bio came to be, because we realized we have some really good ideas. And some of these mentors you can now see are now our advisors. So for example, Jay Kiesling, who is from UC Berkeley, has been a mentor to Gabriel for several years. Matt Krogan and Greg Hiller both are, if you want to do cell culture at scale, these are the two of the three people in the world that you want to talk to, and they are on our advisory board. We also have Professor Rawat, who is an expert in cell biology from UCLA on our advisory board. And I think I'm pretty sure we're the only cell culture meat company that actually has a butcher on their advisory board. So Guy Crims is a master butcher, a Wagyu butcher, and an expert who has traveled to Japan multiple times and is importing the finest meats from there and serving them in his Nikko steakhouse. And he has been an advisor to us since the very early days. And last but not least, we also working with Ron Shigeta, who is one of the co-founders of IndieBio, and is of course an expert in everything that's related to food and especially cellular agriculture. So we are very, very grateful to call these people our advisors. The other part about building a successful company in this field is, of course, the people that you hire. And if you move to the next slide, it tells a little bit more about at least the leadership team that we've assembled. And let me tell you that this was not by chance, but this was all we really planned. We wanted to have a team that reflects the company that we want to build. And we believe in bringing a diverse set of peoples with diverse backgrounds and experiences to the table. And so far, I'm really proud to say that we achieved that. Not only are we nearly 60% female and female-led, we have people from, I think in the meantime, it's over 10 cultures represented. We speak 13 languages at Orbillion Bio, and that has been helpful in so many situations as a startup where you have to translate something in a different language and somebody on the team speaks it, or you have to send someone to speak in Paris in French. All of that already happened to us, and it's really useful on a lot of levels. And then we're talking about food. And as I mentioned before, food has a big cultural component. And we want to take cell cultured meat global. And for that, you cannot just make a burger and serve that burger everywhere, right? You need to understand what is the food that people crave and how they would eat the product that you make. And for that, you also need people that understand food on that very level. So with that, really, really proud to tell you a little bit more about our team. We combine people with backgrounds from the best universities and companies that have worked in food, that have worked in cell biology, that have worked in scaling processes. And as you can see, they have every years of experience already. That really helps, especially in an early stage startup, to speed things up and really build the technologies, build the product that you want to build. No, Shai, if you have any question, otherwise we can move on to the next slide.
I think let's finish. I think it's the last one, and then already a couple of questions coming in, and we can.
Excited. I'm glad. Yeah. So I didn't put people to sleep. So this is just our contact information and also a little picture that we took last year at our first in-person retreat in Napa, which is close to our headquarters in the San Francisco Bay Area, where you just see part of our team. But, while everyone is hardworking and super smart, we also know how to have fun. And that is something that's also really important. With that, I'll leave you and we can go into some of these questions.
So first, thank you very much. Really exciting. A few questions that coming in, and I'll combine maybe a few of them together. So the first question is around the health dimension or the health aspect of cultured meat, and there are two angles. One, on the positive side, is there any benefits that you can infuse into the cultured meat that reduces some of the negative effects, like cholesterol, like and many other things that are associated with consumption of red meat? Because again, one of the reasons that I decided to not consume red meat is because of the health issues. So this is one angle. The other angle is the genetically modified angle, which for whatever reason, people, especially in the US, but definitely in Europe, have some concerns. And the question whether there is a body of evidence today that should suggest that there are no harmful effects on humans when consuming genetically modified cultured meat.
Great question. So we do not use genetic modifications. So our product is non-GMO. So I don't have much more to say to that, other than that I think it's the history of how we've been talking about GMO has caused these insecurities in consumers, and they're definitely not reflective of the realities of GMOs. But I'll leave it at that. There's the maybe one addition. Without GMOs, we wouldn't have insulin. We wouldn't have the rennet that we're using to make cheese that was used to come from the stomachs of veals, of calves, young cows. So it really depends on how you use GMO, and there are no negative effects on health because you use GMO. Let's put it like that. But again, so we're not using GMO. Regarding health benefit, that's exactly what we're looking at. So for us, the goal is to make products that are good for people. I like to eat good food. I am not a person that likes chicken nuggets or fried stuff or anything like that. I just really like good food. I don't eat that much meat. So if I eat meat, I want it to be good meat, but not everybody has the choice or can afford to buy, the steak from the regenerative farmer that was grass-fed and grass-finished. So with that said, we're looking really into understanding these details, because I know people think that we know a lot about nutrition, but we actually don't. And then everyone is different. Everybody's body is different. So what works for or is good for some people is not good for others. Some people don't have an issue with eating cholesterol at higher levels. For others, it's maybe an issue. So with that, looking into personalized nutrition in the future is one of the big promises of Cell Act. But for that, science and research also takes time. So this will take a couple of years to really refine what all the detailed things that we can do. But the one thing that we can do right now is already having something that traditionally harvested meat can never be. We have something that's very defined, that is the same every time, that has regulatory approval, and that by definition is safe, meaning no foodborne illnesses that come usually from the slaughtering process or from, the way cattle live, for example, right? There are no antibiotics being used. There are, we can, for example, exactly say what is the composition and the cholesterol content. By the way, cholesterol is something that you unfortunately cannot remove completely because it's part of the cell wall of any animal mammalian cell. So unfortunately, we cannot remove it completely, but who knows, there will be a method to at least reduce it and also to dive more into potential health benefits that we can do. So I would say what we can do immediately is this very controlled process where you know what you're getting. You get the same product every time, which you don't get with traditionally harvested meat. You don't know if that cow was raised next to a 6-lane highway and breathed in all these exhaust emissions all her life, and then, end it on your table, or you don't know what that cow ate either. So with that, I would say there's a big advantage already that you get a very defined product.
Thank you. You mentioned regulatory, and curious to know about the regulatory challenges that are currently, that the industry is currently facing, and when do you expect, this to become, approved by the different bodies? So regardless of the cost and the supply chain, but from a regulatory point of view, it will be approved to buy these things, in the nearest supermarket or in the specialty shops that might distribute these products.
Yeah, that's a great question, and definitely one of the very important milestones for us as a company to get regulatory approval. And historically seen from let's talk about the last 10 years, right? There has been a lot of movement in how regulatory authorities look at cell cultured meat. For example, in Singapore, cell cultured meat has already been approved, and there is a pathway to approval there that is pretty straightforward. And other countries are diving into looking into what framework, what regulatory framework do we need. In the US, it's, for example, FDA and USDA that will share that regulation. And it is something where we know that FDA and USDA have been talking to each other and to companies for at least 2 years now, and they're coming ever closer to approving the first product. I cannot say exactly when it will be, but it's definitely something that's a matter of months, and not multiple months, and not multiple years. And then with that, once FDA and USDA approve that, I think we will see a lot of other countries also following suit. That's what I think. But of course, the regulatory authorities have a very important thing to do, which is making sure that the product is safe for consumption. That's exactly what they're doing, and they're working with the companies to do exactly that. So again, I think we will see a lot of movement there in the next coming months and years, and I'm very excited to see a variety of products out there that I can finally try.
Great. Maybe a slightly I would say personal question. You mentioned some of your non-work type of let's call it hobbies, your horse and your cooking desires. I wonder, as the CEO of a startup company, some of us have been in the startup industry, and I personally also was a founder of a startup 20 years ago. How do you manage to find the balance between, not working 24/7 for the startup and still finding the time to do, things that are important to you?
Yeah, it's difficult. And there are definitely times where I have more of a balance and times where I have less of a balance. But one thing that I feel very lucky, and again, it comes back to the people surrounding me, right? My family, my friends, my co-founders, the team. We are looking out for each other, and I feel very, very supported and very lucky in that I do have very understanding people that help me to also find that balance, right? And then I think one thing that Europe has taught me that maybe is not very typical for the US is that downtime, vacation, hobbies is actually part of work, and it's really important. And some of the best ideas that I had came after I didn't think about work 24/7 for 1 or 2 or 3 days. And that actually happens. And that is reflected also in our policies at Orbillion Bio. We definitely want our team to take holidays, want a vacation, and we have a very generous policy there. We encourage people to do that because we know how valuable it is. So with that, I also have to lead by example and take some time off every now and then. And I try to reserve, when I'm not traveling, 1 day a week for my horse, which is not much, but better than nothing.
Great. So maybe final question before we conclude. Imagine we are fast forward 3 years. Tell me how you envision the meat consumption industry to look like in 3 years.
Yes, I think in 3 years we will see that plant-based alternatives will have a constant place in the market and will be more and more normalized as part of menus in more parts of the world. And we also will see a slow rise of cell-cultured meat in different geographies. It's not going to be a dominant thing, but it's going to be more normalized. Like, I think Impossible did a great job with their product and how it just became an institution in the US very quickly, right? So we'll see that coming from fringe to a regular thing very, very soon. And I think as soon as people and consumers are able to taste it and realize, oh, actually, that's just meat and it's tasty, there will be really a much bigger pool also of people that want to try. There will be a pull from the market, and that again will, I think, drive also the constant growth. I think we will see a larger scale penetration, and there were some studies also that came on results that came from Barclays that said, cell cultured meat will be a $450 billion market by the mid of the next decade. So we will see a constant rise of these products over the next 10, 15 years. And if I go forward 20, 30, 40, 50 years, I think people will be like, what? We did industrial farming and slaughtered millions of animals every year. This is crazy.
So do you actually envision a point in the future that animals will not be killed for eating?
I don't think that no animals will be killed because, there are people in certain parts of the world that rely on getting the protein from that. I don't think that will change that quickly. But I think that the mass-produced farming will have lost its is not justified anymore. And that cell-cultured meat will be the mass-produced meat, and that we will have also a lot of delicious plant-based alternatives. I think that the way we consume will change significantly, and I'm really looking at the younger folks here at the next generation and the next generations to lead the charge there. And I think we'll see a massively changed consumption pattern.
Well, I definitely subscribe to this future, and Patricia, with that, very positive outlook, we will conclude. Thank you very much. It was amazing and, eye-opening, and really, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you, Shai. It was great being here today, and thanks for the amazing questions, everyone. Thanks for everyone that has listened in, and sorry if I couldn't answer all of the questions, but I'll definitely share some links with you, Shai.
Thank you very much.